structural organization in animals. Now this is a chapter which deals with animal tissues and certain examples like earthworm and the frog, where we study about the morphology and anatomy of the various systems like digestive system and all that. So this structural organization in animals, first we study about the animal tissues. So animal tissues, we study about the types of the tissues. So there are 4 types of animal tissues. So these 4 types of animal tissues are: one is epithelial tissue, then second one is connective tissue, then the third one is muscular tissue, and fourth one is the nerve tissue or nervous tissue. So these are the 4 types of tissues which we have to study in detail. Means what their structure and where they are present in the body parts. So animal tissues are mainly 4 types: epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue, and nerve tissue. Now epithelial tissue deals with, or it consists of, or the tissue is present in the surfaces, the external surfaces and internal surfaces of the body organs. Now any organ we take into consideration, whether it is inside or outside, the surface of that organ and the internal surface. Suppose if the organ is having a cavity, so then the cavity is lined by the epithelial tissue. So there are different types of epithelial tissues, and based on their shape of the cells and their functions, there are different types. Now the epithelial tissue consists of cells which are arranged in a row, and when they are made up of a layer of cells. Suppose if the epithelial tissue consists of a single layer, so there is only one layer of cells, so that is called as a simple epithelium. So the single layer of cells, simple epithelium. Suppose if there are 2 or more number of layers, it is called as compound epithelium, or sometimes it is called as stratified epithelium. So this compound epithelium or stratified epithelium is present in different parts of the body. Now first we shall study the different types of tissues. Now the main characteristics of this epithelial tissue is whether it is simple epithelium or compound epithelium or stratified epithelium, the cells which are present in layer or layers, they are resting on a non-cellular membrane which is called as the basement membrane. So the basement membrane, it is a specific or the characteristic feature of the epithelial tissue. So based on the shape of the cells, there are different types of epithelial tissues. So one type is squamous epithelium. Now the word itself suggests squamous means not square, but somewhat flattened, squashed, what we call it as. So these squamous epithelial cells, they are somewhat flat like this, and they are present on the basement membrane. Now of course the cells are uninucleate. There is no any important characteristic feature in the cell structure or the cell structure here, and these cells are somewhat irregular. So like this. So these cells are irregular shaped. So this is the nucleus. So like that the cells are flat That is why they are called as squamous epithelium. Squamous means squashed, means flattened. So though they appear laterally like this, but they are having irregular borders. So they are irregular in shape. However, they are uninucleate, and they are having a cytoplasm and all that. So no, there is no any character. This is the basement membrane on which the cells are resting. So this is squamous epithelium. So squamous epithelium, it is present in the blood vessels and in the lungs, alveoli of the lungs and blood vessels. They consists of simple squamous epithelium. And however, stratified or compound squamous epithelium is present in our skin. So the skin is actually made up of squamous epithelium, but not simple squamous, but it is made up of compound or stratified epithelium. That is, the skin is made up of several layers of cells, and that is squamous epithelium. Then there is one more type of epithelium called as cuboidal epithelium. So cuboidal epithelium, the name itself suggests the cells are cube-like, cube-shaped they are. So these cuboidal cells, they are resting on the basement membrane as usual. So cuboidal epithelium, it is present in the nephrons and kidney. So the nephrons of the kidney, they are made up of cuboidal epithelium, and even in some ducts of our glands like thyroid gland and so on, many glands. So they contain cuboidal epithelium, and that is the type of cuboidal epithelium. So the cells are cube-like, and hence they are called as cuboidal epithelium. So then another type of epithelium, that is columnar epithelium. So columnar, column-like. So the word itself suggests squashed, cuboidal and columnar. Here these column-shaped cells, they are not exactly cylindrical, but somewhat broad at one end and narrow at another end. So this is how the cells look like. So the free end of the cell is broad, and the narrow end of the cell is towards the basement membrane. This is the basement membrane, this is the cell. And another important characteristics in this is the nucleus is situated at the base of the cell like this, not in the center. But usually in the squamous and cuboidal, it is almost in the central region, located in the center. But in some cases it may be away from the center. But here in case of columnar epithelium, the cells are elongated but not exactly cylindrical. They are broad at the free end and narrow at the base towards the basement membrane. The nucleus is situated towards the base of the cell, and this columnar epithelium is present in our wall of the intestine and wall of the stomach. So the wall of the stomach and intestine, they contain columnar. So this epithelium, they are having different functions. For example, squamous, it helps in protection and secretion. Cuboidal epithelium, it helps in absorption and secretion. Then the columnar epithelium, it helps in absorption, especially in the wall of the intestine. The villi, what we call, so those villi, finger-like projections, they are containing they are made up of columnar epithelium. And sometimes this columnar epithelial cells, they are having minute finger-like projections called as microvilli. So these minute projections at the free surface of the cell, they are called as the microvilli. So the microvilli increase the absorptive surface for absorption in case of intestine. That is columnar epithelium, which is present in the intestine. Then if we come to another type called as the ciliated epithelium. So ciliated epithelium is a modified columnar epithelium. So just a change in the columnar epithelium. The cells are same. They are elongated like this, and they are having narrow end and broad free end, same. But instead of microvilli, these are microvilli. Microvilli are just extensions of the plasma membrane. As in the animal cell there is no cell wall, so the plasma membrane will extend into small finger-like projections which are called as microvilli. Instead of microvilli, there are small hair-like structures which are called as cilia. That is why ciliated epithelium. So based on their functions and shape, they are classified like this. So ciliated epithelium, they are having cilia. So this epithelium is present in our respiratory tract, that is in the nasal cavity and all that. And also it is present in the fallopian tube of the female reproductive system, which is also called as the oviduct. So there the rhythmic movement or the rhythmic beating of the cilia, they exhibit rhythmic movements, rhythmic beating, and this causes the movement of the mucus in the this respiratory tract. And in case of fallopian tube, it helps in the this movement of the egg or the ovum after fertilization. So this is a ciliated epithelium. And then there is another type of epithelium which is called as glandular epithelium. Now this glandular epithelium is either cuboidal or columnar epithelium. It is modified for its function. Gland. So a gland is a cell or cells which are specific for secretion. So they secrete. So these cells, what they do is they enclose a cavity and into which they secrete various secretions. So this glandular epithelium is made up of either columnar or cuboidal cells, and they are particularly or they are specialized or specific for secretory in function or for secretion. And again here the glandular epithelium may be unicellular or multicellular, means it is made up of a single cell or a many cells. So there are also glands which are made up of a single cell. For example, goblet cells. In the wall of the stomach, there are cells which are called as goblet cells, which are single, and they secrete mucus in the gastric cavity and helps in for various functions for protection. And multicellular glands are many. For example, the salivary glands, they are multicellular. So like that, the glands may be unicellular or multicellular. That is about a ciliated, this glandular epithelium, which purely is specialized or particularly its function is secretion. So these are the 5 types of epithelial tissue. So epithelial tissues are tissues which form the external surface and the internal surface of the organs. So they cover the external surface and also the internal surface of the various organs in the body, and there are different types based on the shape and functions: squamous epithelium, cuboidal epithelium, columnar epithelium, ciliated epithelium, and glandular epithelium. So like that, the epithelium is of different types. Now about the gland, so we have already mentioned that glandular epithelium means it purely secretes particular secretion. So all glands in our body, they are made up of glandular epithelium: pituitary gland, thyroid gland, adrenal gland, pineal gland. So various glands, thymus gland, so salivary glands, so sweat glands, all these glands are made up of glandular epithelium. A glandular epithelium is made up of cuboidal or columnar epithelium. Then the glands, it may be unicellular or multicellular. Example I have just mentioned: unicellular is goblet cells, multicellular salivary glands. And there are 2 types of glands based on their secretions. in what way they secrete their secretions. Based on that, there are two types of glands. So those two types of glands which we mention are exocrine glands and endocrine glands. So exocrine and endocrine glands. Now a gland means it is made up of cells, either columnar or cuboidal. Now these glands, when they secrete their secretions, if that secretion is carried in a particular duct and it is carried to different parts of the body or to any part. So when they are having, it is carried through a duct, the secretion, they are called as exocrine gland. So whatever they secrete, that secretion is transported through the duct. Our salivary glands are exocrine. Our salivary glands, which are present in the mouth cavity, whatever they produce, that is carried by the duct, and that duct is opening into our mouth cavity where the saliva is released. So these salivary glands are present in the mouth region, and so these salivary glands, they secrete the secretions. Even the sweat duct, which secretes the sweat on our skin. So this sweat duct is present in the skin, at the base of the skin, and the sweat gland is having a duct. So that duct carries the sweat, and that sweat spreads on the surface of the skin. So like that, exocrine glands, they are having ducts, and the secretions which are released by them, they are transported through specified or specific ducts. Whereas endocrine are opposite, they don't have ducts. Whatever they release, the secretions are not carried by any duct. There is no any duct. Such glands, they release their secretions in the surrounding blood capillaries. So as the gland is supplied with blood capillaries, whatever the cells release the secretions, that secretion will be poured into the surrounding blood capillaries, and in the blood the secretions are mixed. So that is why these don't have ducts. So that is why they are called as ductless glands. They don't have ducts. So ductless glands, for example, pituitary gland, thyroid gland, adrenal gland, they are all endocrine glands. Exocrine, already I mentioned, salivary gland, sweat gland, all they are having ducts, and their secretions are transported through the ducts. Whereas endocrine, they are not having any ducts. So that is about the types of glands, and that is about this epithelial tissue. So next, coming to the connective tissue. So connective tissue, the word itself suggests, it helps in connecting. That is one function actually. So here connective tissue is the one which helps in connecting one tissue and another tissue. So this connective tissue means it may connect a epithelial tissue and a muscular tissue, like that. That is the one. Now this connective tissue is having some basic structure. So that basic structure, before going to that, one aspect of epithelial tissue. Now in epithelial tissue, we are having certain junctions which are present in between the cells. So these structures help in certain functions. So there are three types of junctions in between the cells. So tight junctions, adhering junctions, and gap junctions. So in between two cells, suppose this is one cell and this is another cell, epithelial cell. These junctions are some intermediate structures between the epithelial cells. So these tight junctions are regions in between the cells in the wall, in the cell, in between the cells, cell membrane, as there is no cell wall here. Now this junctions are regions where they don't allow the materials to pass from one cell to another cell. Tight. So the word itself suggests tight means strict. It will not allow. So it is a region, it is a kind of junction between the epithelial cells such that there is no leaking or the movement of the materials across the tissue. So the substances from the one cell to another cell is stopped. It is not allowed. That is tight junctions. The word itself we can come to know. Adhering means in between the cells there is a kind of substance which is somewhat a cementing function, and this substance which is just like a cement, it will attach the neighboring cells together. That junction is called as adhering junction. So it is just the attachment of the two cells, that is junction. Then in the gap junction or in the gap junctions, here there are fine hydrophilic channels in between the two cells. So these hydrophilic channels which are present here, so these channels are minute pore-like structures which are very sensitive, and through this channel which are hydrophilic in nature, so the substances will pass from one cell to another cell. So this is gap junction. So that means there is a gap between the two cells. So these are the three type of junctions present in this epithelial tissues. That is, they are only specific to epithelial tissues. This is not in general. Such kind of junctions in between the cells, they are only present in the epithelial tissues. So name the junctions present in the epithelial tissues: tight junction, adhering junction, and this gap junction. So tight junction, it will not allow the movement of any substance, whereas adhering junction, it will just attach the two cells by the help of a cement-like substance, whereas gap junction, it is having a small hydrophilic channel between the two cells, and where the movement of the or in other words, there is chemical exchange in between the two cells. That is about the junction. Now coming to the connective tissue. So this connective tissue is a tissue which connects one and the other. That is the main function of this tissue. And here the tissue contains cells which are not arranged in a particular manner, and this tissue contains three important parts in it. So one material is the matrix, or it is also called as ground substance, cells, and fibers. So these are the three things what we can see in the tissue. The tissue consists of a matrix, which is also called as ground substance, and there are different types of cells, or there may be only single type of cell, and there is fibers. So this tissue it helps in supporting the other tissues also. So these fibers are present in all types of connective tissue except blood, which is one type of connective tissue. So here we study there are three types of connective tissue. So any connective tissue consists of a ground substance which is called as matrix. So this matrix, the chemical composition is different in different tissues. In this matrix, there are only one type of cells, or there are even more type of many types of cells in the this matrix. And again, the cells are not arranged in a particular pattern. As in the case of epithelial tissue, the cells are arranged in a line, in a layer, or in a row. But in connective tissue, there is no any specific arrangement of the cells. They are irregularly scattered, irregularly distributed in the matrix or the ground tissue. And along with that, there are fibers, except in the blood. So there are three types of connective tissue. One type of connective tissue is loose connective tissue is one type. So this loose connective tissue, then dense connective tissue, and specialized connective tissue. So these are the three types of connective tissue which we can differentiate mainly. Again, under this we come across one type of tissue which is called as areolar tissue, and there is another type which is called as adipose tissue. So one by one we shall see what are these present. So again here there is dense regular connective tissue, dense irregular connective tissue. So two types. And in specialized, again we come across three types called as cartilage, then bone, and blood. So these are the types of specialized connective tissue. Now one by one, just in brief, we shall go through this. Connective tissue is divided into loose connective tissue, dense connective tissue, specialized connective tissue. So here the word loose and dense. Loose means the cells are loosely arranged, that is the meaning. So they are loosely arranged in the matrix. Here in the case of dense, the fibers are densely packed, and that is why they are called as, that is called as the dense connective tissue. Then specialized, these are somewhat special type of connective tissue. So in areolar tissue, one by one we shall see. Areolar tissue is present just below our skin. Suppose if we remove this skin, that is the squamous epithelium, the compound squamous epithelium, the stratified squamous epithelium. So when we remove, we can see a somewhat white colored layer just below the skin. Sometimes when we get injury, when the skin gets damaged, we can see some white structure there which is having blood vessels. So that is the areolar connective tissue. So throughout the body, below the skin is the areolar connective tissue. That is the only location of the areolar connective tissue. Now coming to its composition, what it contains. So it contains the matrix or the ground tissue. Now this matrix or ground tissue contains cells and fibers. There are actually 5 types of cells in this matrix, and this matrix is somewhat gelatinous in nature. It is just like gelatin, and this gelatinous matrix which is actually made up of some glucoprotein component, and we are not supposed to study the details of that. So this matrix contains 5 types of cells. So those 5 types of cells are fibroblast cells, mast cells, macrophages, then plasma cells, lymphocytes. See, fibroblasts, they secrete fibers. So these fibers are present in this. So the mast cells, the fibroblast cells, then the lymphocytes, plasma cells, they are present in this matrix. So these fibroblasts, so one by one we shall see. Fibroblasts, they secrete fibers which are present in the matrix. So these fibers are again two types, collagen fibers and elastin fibers. So collagen fibers are also called as white fibers because they are white in color, and whereas these elastin fibers are also called as yellow fibers, and they are somewhat light yellowish in color. So these two types of fibers are present. In addition to that, there are also certain fibers which are called as reticulate fibers. When we go into more detail, that we come across. So like that, 5 types of cells. So fibroblasts, they secrete or they produce the fibers in the matrix. So the mast cells, they secrete heparin, which prevents blood clotting in our body. That is a function. Then macrophages, they are somewhat phagocytic in function. Phagocytic means engulfing the foreign bodies. Suppose a bacteria enter into the our tissue, areolar tissue, these macrophages will engulf the bacteria just like how the amoeba engulfs a food particle. In the same way, the macrophages are phagocytic in function. Then plasma cells, they secrete antibodies. Lymphocytes, they are one type of WBC. So like that, these are the 5 types of cells present in the areolar tissue, and there are fibers which are freely distributed. Now this tissue is called as areolar because when the fibers were seen, suppose this is one fiber and this is another fiber, so these fibers are present in different directions. When the tissue was first observed, the space between the fibers, so when the fibers were crossing in different directions, the space in between the fibers appeared like air cavities, air spaces. So that is why when it was first observed, it was thought that the tissue contains air cavities or the tissue contains air spaces. That is why it was called as areolar tissue. But actually that name is not appropriate because there are no air spaces. So these are not actually air spaces, but it was believed when the tissue was first observed. That is why the word areolar tissue has been given to this tissue. So that is about areolar tissue. Now the adipose tissue is a modification of the areolar tissue. In adipose tissue, what happens, which is also called as the fat tissue, there is abundant storage of the fat. So there is a reserved fat which is present in the adipose tissue, and this adipose tissue is present in the wall of the heart and also wall of the kidney. So it is a protective tissue. It helps in protection, and the main structure is the cells which are present here. There they store fat material, and thus that is adipose tissue. So there are no many types of cells here. So there are particularly fat cells or adipose cells, they are called as. They store reserve food material in the form of fat, and thus they prevent the loss of heat from the body. That is adipose tissue. So these two are loose connective tissues. Dense connective tissue means the word itself suggests that the fibers are here densely arranged, regular and irregular. That means fibers are regularly arranged in the form of bundles. So these fibers are arranged regularly, and that is why especially the collagen fibers, the white fibers what I mentioned, so they are arranged in a particular pattern, and that is why they are called as dense regular connective tissue. So this dense regular connective tissue is present in the tendon and this what is called as the ligament, in the case of ligaments. So tendon tissue means it it is a tissue which is present in between the muscles and bones. So that connects the muscles and bones where it contains collagen fibers regularly arranged. And in between bone and bone there is a ligament, that is especially in the joints. Here there is a ligament, and the muscles and bones there is the tendon tissue, which is a dense regular connective tissue, and that contains the collagen fibers in a particular pattern. Then irregular tissue. So the fibers are irregularly scattered. That means they are not having a particular orientation. So the orientation is in a different manner. There are fibers, but the orientation is different, and that is why this is called as irregular. So these are present in our skin, and also in the kidneys also they are present, and also in the adrenal gland we find a dense irregular connective tissue. That is about the second type of connective tissue. Then if you come to the specialized tissue, so these specialized connective tissue, so those are three types: cartilage, bone and blood. Now cartilage is a tissue which is surrounded by a layer called as perichondrium. Here also there is matrix. So matrix is present in all. Here also there are cells and fibers, but collagen fibers are dominant here. So they are prominent in this, and that is why based on the fibers they are called as regular and irregular. And in the case of collagen, in the cartilage, so this also the matrix is present. Now the matrix is made up of a protein which is called as chondromucoprotein. So this matrix is also called as chondrin, and this matrix contains only one type of cells. They are called as the cartilage cells, or chondrocytes they are called as. So the chondrocytes, they are present in the irregularly scattered. They are present in single or sometimes 2 cells, 3 cells. And when this is the matrix here, the cells are not in contact with the matrix. Instead, there are certain cavities like this, which are called as lacuna. So these lacuna are present in the matrix, and in this we find the cartilage cells. Suppose this is a cartilage cell. Sometimes there may be 2 cells, and sometimes there may be 3 cells like this. A cavity or a lacuna contains a single cell, 2 cells or 3 cells. So like that, the cavities or the lacuna contains cartilage cells or chondrocytes they are called as, but that means the cells are not in contact with the matrix. So this matrix is somewhat made up of a protein, chondromucoprotein, and this is the characteristic of the cartilage. Now again, when we go into further detail, there are different types of cartilage. There is elastic cartilage, there is hyaline cartilage, there is fibrous cartilage, like that. So whatever it is, in general we are telling here. So cartilage, it is present at the tip of the nose, in the ear lobe, and in the trachea. There is cartilage, and also in the backbone, in between the vertebral discs, there is cartilage. That is actually fibrous cartilage. Now this cartilage helps in the protection, and also it helps in withstanding the tension. That is also the function of this cartilage. So cartilage is sometimes called as soft bone, as we have studied in the fishes, cartilage fishes and bony fishes. So cartilage means it's just like a bone, but it is not bone. It is a soft in nature. Now for example, if you take the ear, so here actually this is completely cartilage. Just when we touch this ear, we feel that it is a bone, but actually it is not a bone here. it is cartilage. So that means we can bend that region as at any directions. So that means cartilage is a soft bone, but whereas the real bone cannot be bent because it is very rigid and hard, isn't it? So that is why cartilage is referred as soft bone. This is the structure of cartilage cells, cavities and matrix. And there are collagen fibers in this matrix. So they are present. Then coming to the bone also, though it appears to be non-living in nature. Now whenever we see a bone anywhere, suppose this is the bone, how it appears like. So this is the bone. Actually we believe that it is a non-living thing, but when we study the structure of the bone, it contains cells, bone cells, osteocytes. So the bone is surrounded by a layer called as periosteum, and inside the bone there is matrix. So this matrix contains bone cells which are also present in cavities like this. So the bone cells, and the bone is hard because the matrix of the bone is deposited with the calcium magnesium compounds. So calcium carbonate, magnesium sulfate and calcium sulfate are the compounds which are deposited in the bone, and hence the bone is very hard. So the bone is also a tissue. Epithelial tissue is also a tissue. Connective tissue is a tissue. But bone is hard and appears to be non-living because of the deposition of the calcium compounds. So calcium carbonate, calcium phosphate, magnesium sulfate are the compounds which are deposited, and that is why the bone is hard. And so there are also cavities in the bone like this, what are called as the lacuna, same like cartilage, and in each lacuna there is only one cell in the bone. So that is the difference between the cartilage and the bone. So the matrix here is there, it is also there, but here the matrix is deposited with calcium and phosphate compounds. Here the lacuna are present, here also present, but here the lacuna contains only one cell in each. But here in cartilage, each lacuna contains one cell, two cells or three cells. Rarely there are 4 cells or 5 cells, but 1, 2 and 3 are common in the lacuna. So that is the difference between. And here also there are collagen fibers, here also there are collagen fibers. In both cases you will find collagen fibers. That is this bone, structure of the bone. And then when we come to the next part of this bone, inside the bone there is a cavity. So when we see, but when we see a bone outside we cannot see that. When we break the bone, or when the bone is cut, inside we find a cavity here. So this cavity contains a tissue which is called as bone marrow. But however we are not studying here, it is an extra thing about the bone. In the bone cavity there is a which is called as the bone marrow cavity. There is a tissue which is called as bone marrow tissue. Now in this bone marrow tissue there are 9 types of cells. Now each type of cells has its own function. For example, the RBC, WBC, the platelets, they are all produced by the bone marrow. Suppose if there is the bone reduction in the RBC, WBC, it is defect in the bone marrow. So the bone marrow helps in the production of RBC, WBC and platelets. That is about the bone. So bone is a one type of tissue which provides a kind of a framework, a skeletal framework to our body. So that is about the bone. Then if you come to the blood, so we need not study more about blood here, a brief explanation. Blood is also a connective tissue, but it is not having fibers. It is having matrix and cells. Only two are the components. So the matrix of the blood is called as plasma. So here also there is matrix in the blood. So the blood plasma is a light yellowish in color, and in this plasma, that is matrix, there are three types of cells, that is RBC, WBC and platelets. No fibers. So blood is the exceptional connective tissue without fibers. All types of connective tissue, they are having all these three, except blood where fibers are absent. So the RBC, they are biconcave in shape, and they contain a red pigment called as hemoglobin. That hemoglobin helps in the transportation of oxygen in the body or in the blood, that supplies to the different tissues and cells. Then WBC, it produces antibodies and helps in defensive function. It provides immunity to our body. That is the function of the WBC, white blood corpuscles. RBCs are also called as erythrocytes. WBCs are called as leukocytes. And platelets. So platelets, they are also produced by the bone marrow. And when we see the RBC and WBC, RBCs are non-nucleated. They don't contain a nucleus, whereas WBC contain nucleus. They are nucleated cells. Platelets are also non-nucleated, but they are smaller than RBC. So these platelets, they help in blood clotting process. So the blood clotting process is brought about by the platelets. That is the function of the platelets. So that is about the structure of the blood. So these are the three specialized connective tissue which we can mention. Then coming to the muscular tissue. So there are three types of muscular tissue. Now what is a muscular tissue, and basically what is its function? So muscular tissue, they are made up of cells which are usually elongated. A muscular tissue does not contain cells which are somewhat round, rectangular or polygonal. All types of muscular tissues, so of course there are three types. So all cells in a muscular tissue, they are always elongated. There are no cells in a muscle tissue which are spherical, polygonal, rectangular or oval shaped like that. So because of the elongated nature of the muscle cells, they are called as muscle fibers. So the muscle cells are called as fibers because they are elongated. And a muscular tissue, of course there is no matrix or something like that as in the case of connective tissue. The cells are closely arranged, and these cells, they may be arranged in a layer or they may be arranged somewhat in an irregular fashion. And these muscular tissues, they are having a specific function. So the function of this muscular tissue is, this muscular tissue, it contains a specific type of proteins called as muscle proteins, they are called as. So myosin and fibrin. So this muscle proteins which are present in the muscle fibers or the muscle cells, these cause the contraction and stretching of the cells, just like a rubber. So we see a rubber band or a rubber thread like that. We can stretch the rubber, or we can even contract the rubber, isn't it? So in the same way, the muscle cells can be stretched and contracted. So here, for example, the muscles. So these muscles, when we do like this, the muscles contract and these stretch. So that means the muscles are having the power of contraction and stretching, and connective tissue and epithelial tissues are not having such property. So the main characteristic feature or the property of the muscular tissues, they can be stretched, they can be shortened, they can be contracted, and they can be condensed like a rubber. So that is the characteristic. So this elasticity, or in other words, the property of elasticity is because of the presence of the muscle proteins in the cells, which help in the stretching and contraction. Then coming to the types of the muscular tissues. So there are three types of muscular tissues. So one type of muscular tissue is skeletal muscular tissue and smooth muscular tissue and cardiac muscular tissue. So these are the three types of muscular tissues. So skeletal and smooth and cardiac. So skeletal muscle tissue means skeleton. They are always attached to the skeleton of our body. That means to the bones. So when we want to observe the skeletal muscles, we have to observe near the bone. The bone is attached with a type of muscles called as skeletal muscles. That is why they are called as skeletal muscles. And these skeletal muscles, they are cylindrical in shape. So suppose this is a skeletal muscle cell, which is also called as fiber. So these are the cells which are arranged like this. And the smooth muscle, just to show the comparison here, they are also elongated, but they are pointed at both ends. So this is how the smooth muscle appears like this. But the cardiac muscles, they are also cylindrical, but they are branched like this. So we can see the branches like this. So these branched cells are observed. This is how the cells look like. So we can find out the differences here in the shape, muscular tissue. All these three are having the property of elasticity. Means they can be shortened, they can be contracted, they can be stretched because of the presence of muscle proteins. Then the muscles, they can be shortened and they can be relaxed, they can be stretched. So these muscles, they are the cause for our body movements. So we are moving, we are walking, we are running, or even by simply sitting or standing, when we are moving the body parts, it is because of the muscles, working of the muscles. Followed. So whenever we are moving any part of the body, it is because of the muscles. So these skeletal muscles are, so one by one, skeletal muscles, they are cylindrical in shape, and they are multinucleated. See the important character. But the nuclei are towards the periphery of the cell. So these are the nuclei. So multinucleated cells. Usually whenever we studied here, they are all uninucleated. So when we are not mentioning that, it is understood. The cells are normal, they are uninucleated. But however, RBC and platelets are non-nucleated. They don't contain nucleus. But here the skeletal muscles, they contain many nuclei. They are multinucleated. So this multinucleated condition is the characteristic feature. They are cylindrical in shape. And inside this cell, another important thing is there are certain band-like structures like this, which are called as the striations. Striations means some strips like, they are called as striations. Striations means belt-like structures, strip-like structures, ಒಂಥರ ಪಟ್ಟಿ ಆಕಾರದ ರಚನೆಗಳು ಅಂತ. So in that cell there are striations seen clear, and that is why they are called as striated muscles. Sometimes they are also called as striated skeletal muscles. As they are found attached to the skeleton, because of their location they are called as skeletal, and due to the presence of the striations they are called as striated muscles or striated muscular tissue. So these striations are the characteristic feature of the skeletal muscles, and these muscles, they are voluntary in function. That means we can stretch them according to our will and wish. So for example, these muscles just I mentioned, so we can stretch and we can contract them. So these are all skeletal muscles. So I can stretch these muscles, I can contract these muscles according to my will and wish. And even in our legs, in our neck, so we can bend our necks to any direction. We can stretch them, we can make them to contract, means voluntarily. So that is why they are voluntary muscles. They are voluntary in function. They function according to our will and wish. Whenever we need, we can make them to contract and we can make them to stretch. That is about this skeletal muscles or the striated muscles. Then if you come to the smooth muscles, they are smooth in nature, hence they are called as smooth. They don't contain striations, hence they are called as non-striated muscles. See, no striations, so that is why non-striated muscles. And these are uninucleated. See difference. The cells are elongated but pointed at both ends. They are spindle shaped. They are also compactly arranged. They contain a single nucleus. They are having pointed ends, but there are no striations as like this. That is why non-striated muscles. This is one important feature. And I said these are present in the skeleton. So these are present in the wall of the blood vessels and wall of any organs inside the body. The wall of the intestine, the wall of the stomach, and the wall of the blood vessels, all they contain smooth muscles or non-striated muscles. So these muscles are involuntary in function. They do not function, or we cannot contract according to our will and wish. So the blood vessels are there inside. We cannot stretch the blood vessels. We cannot contract the blood vessels according to our will and wish. Followed. So that is why they are involuntary in function. They are contracting by their own according to the need in that part of the body. Then that is about the smooth muscles, and there are no striations and uninucleated. They are elongated, spindle shaped with pointed ends like this. They are involuntary in function. And then if you come to the cardiac muscles, so cardiac muscles, they are also cylindrical but branched. Cylindrical, unbranched. But cardiac muscles, cylindrical, branched. And in case of skeletal muscles, they are multinucleated, but these are uninucleated, single nucleus like this. So the nucleus is single. See the difference between this and this. These are cylindrical, unbranched, cylindrical, branched, multinucleated, uninucleated. And here the striations are there, but not clear as that of that. See, the striations are very somewhat mild. In other words, these striations which are there, they are somewhat faint, you can see. Faint striations they are called as. Faint means not clear. Means whenever we see an object, if it is not clear, we call it as faint. For example, while reading, when you don't see the words clearly, we call it as faint. Ontara mab antar nodi, not clear. So there are striations but not clear. Here there are clear striations. That is also very important. The striations are very distinct and clear, but the striations are not clear. They are somewhat faint, and then they are uninucleated, cylindrical, branched, and again these are involuntary in function. That means they are not functioning according to our will and wish. They are present in the wall of the heart. See, cardiac means heart, cardio. So cardiac means heart, hence they are called as cardiac muscles. They are present only in the wall of the heart, not in any other part of the body. So these two are present in all parts of the body. Wherever there is bone, we find this. Wherever there are blood vessels, we find this. But this is only restricted to the wall of the heart. Hence they are called as cardiac tissues, cardiac muscular tissues, and we cannot contract and expand according to our will and wish. So these two are involuntary. So this is also involuntary. And one more important characteristics of the cardiac tissue is there is a band-like structure at the junction of each cell. Wherever two cells meet each other, we find a band-like structure which is called as intercalated discs. This is a characteristic feature of the cardiac muscles. So multinucleate condition is a characteristic feature of this. Presence of striations, distinct striations is the characteristic of this. Here striations are there but not clear. But the presence of intercalated disc, it is a disc at the junction of the two cells. So this is intercalated discs, which are a characteristic feature of the cardiac muscles, and the function of this is they transmit the muscles, they relay the impulses. Whenever a cell receives an impulse, that impulse is relayed, is transferred to the neighboring cell by the help of this intercalated disc. So that is about this structure of the cardiac muscles. So these are the three types of muscular tissues which are present in our body. Then lastly, nerve tissue, which we are not studying in detail here. Just to mention about the nerve tissue here. But more about the nerve tissue we will be studying in another chapter in human physiology. In the last chapter, probably in the chapter number 20 or 21st, like that, there we will be studying the structure of the nerve cell and its functions and all that. But here in brief, a nerve tissue consists of nerve cells, or what are called as neurons, and there are another type of cells in the nerve cells called as neuroglial cells. So the nerve cells in a nerve tissue are the neurons. The neurons are the structural and functional units of the nerve tissue. The main function of the nerve tissue is conducted by the neurons, and supporting the neurons there are the neuroglial cells. So the neuroglial cells are the supporting cells which help in the functioning of the neurons. So these are the four types of animal tissues. So the structure of the neuron and the neuroglial cells, I said we will be studying in another chapter in detail, but here just we are mentioning the type of the cells which are present in the nerve tissue. So they are the four types of tissues: epithelial, connective, muscular and nerve tissue. And one point to remember here is in our body the abundant tissue which is present is actually the connective tissue. So there are epithelial tissues in our body, connective tissues, there is muscular tissues, and there is nerve tissue. But connective tissue is the tissue which is abundantly present in our body. So because it includes all these things, see, bone, blood and cartilage, and also these regular, irregular, areolar tissue and all that, they are included in this. So that is why the connective tissue is abundant, and these are the four types of animal tissues which are present in the human body.